I feel like I say this a lot, and I'm sure I do, but I just really love this piece. And so I keep saying that. But again, I love art history. What can I say? So this is the Sika Dwa Kofi, which is in our language known as the Golden Stool. So the Golden Stool is from the Ashanti people of an area we would now refer to as Ghana, the Ashanti people. This is from around 1700, and it's actually a miraculous object that fell from the heavens. And so this might be similar to Our Lady of the Guadalupe that we talked about as being a miraculous object. This is gold and wood, and then the ornaments that are around the side of it, you can kind of see these little talisman and the bells tied to it. These are protective devices, which we'll talk about. So for this work, we're going to watch parts of a smart history video, and then we'll discuss a little bit more because they have great images and just do a really good job of being concise with it. So this. All right.
We're at the University of Pennsylvania Museum of Archaeology and Anthropology talking about the Golden Stool. We're actually going to be looking at several different objects to make sense of this very important object that we don't have in a collection. It still exists in the Ashanti Nation in Ghana.
It was incredibly important to the Ashanti people that that object remained in their possession, but that's a story we'll come back to. Let's talk about its origin.
In the early 1700s,
so this is going to get us into context, but I also want you guys noticing how that's going to give us some of our themes, right? So power and authority is definitely going to be a huge part of this work.
A man named Osei Tutu, an important king, was able to unify all the surrounding lands.
He created the nation of the Ashanti people.
The golden stool falls from the sky and lands in the lap of Osei Tutu.
So this is a miracle.
Absolutely. And this is a wooden stool covered in gold, which was said to have been made in the heavens, said to be the soul of the Ashanti Nation. So it takes on the essence of the entire.
So one of the things that they're going to talk about, and I want you guys thinking about, is how an object can be more important than the leader. And so if we're thinking about our context of the United States, are there things more important than the president? Yes, obviously. So things like the Constitution, right, are going to be things that we would say, okay, this object represents the heart. We may not say soul, we might, but the heart of this nation, right? So it's not going to be just about a king or a leader at that point in time. It's something broader than that that's going to represent their culture, their identity.
Group, in the same way that we'll see a man's stool or a woman's stool can take on the essence of that person.
So in a way, the stool is more important than any single king of the Ashanti people.
It is far more sacred than the Ashanti Hini himself. And in fact, the golden stool is always given its own stool or its own chair on which to sit next to the Ashanti Hini, like we see in this picture.
This is an area that is rich in gold, and the gold comes to symbolize royalty for the Ashanti people.
They were in charge of the gold trade through North Africa. This was long before Europeans were even there, but also gold is the color of royalty. So whether it's gold in the form of a textile color or it's the material of gold, it was reserved for royal use.
So let's look at the object.
So we're going to skip a little bit here. I want you guys to notice, I think it's so interesting that the stool is actually given its own throne. And it's placed on its side, and we're going to talk about the significance of that as well. But it actually sits there beside the king.
The history of the Ashanti people, the continuing involvement of the British
The British, certainly since the early 19th century, were interested in securing a way to control gold in this area, and they named this area the Gold Coast. The Ashanti obviously were not wanting to give up their control of this precious material, which had this royal significance.
And in 1874, the British destroyed the Ashanti capital, took lots back to England. Much of it remains in the British Museum collection today.
And one of the objects, of course, that they really wanted to get their hands on was the golden stool. They first exiled Prempeh I, that was the Ashanti in the late 1800s.
The Ashanti people hid the golden stool.
The golden stool, which was obviously very important, in fact, more sacred than Prempeh I himself, was in danger, and the British really tried hard to hunt it down.
The British governor said, and I'm reading here from a record of what happened. He said, "Where is the golden stool? I am the representative of the paramount power. Why have you relegated me to this ordinary chair? Why did you not take the opportunity of my coming to bring the golden stool for me to sit upon?"
This was so offensive to the people of Ghana that a foreigner would come and demand their most precious and sacred object to sit on. This is not a stool anyone was allowed to sit on. In fact, it sat on its own stool. So Ya Asantewa, a queen mother, assembled all the soldiers she could find to fight against the British.
No, the Ashanti people were defeated, but the stool remained hidden.
The Ashanti were pretty successful in that they were allowed some autonomy, and by the 1920s, the British even agreed to allow Prempeh I to return, and there was a promise made that the golden stool would not be taken, and the golden stool was allowed to come out of hiding. Men and women are gifted stools by their parents when they come of age, and the idea of stools is really central, not just to kingship, but to everyday people. And this brass weight in this case is a replica of what a man or woman would sit on, but made of wood. So a man and woman's everyday stool used for things like sitting and socializing, sitting and eating, sitting and working, sounds very ordinary to us, but stools that one uses often take on their sunsum. Sunsum is a Ashanti concept or
I want you guys to make sure that you write down that word sunsum. So we're going to talk about it here, but I really want you guys thinking about it being like a life force and essence. So the sunsum of a person is going to remain with an object that they touch, use, are associated with, right? So that essence actually is going to transfer to the object.
Traditional idea that your energy, it's like an aura that touches the things that you use a lot. So in order to keep your sunsum intact, when you leave the room, traditionally you would tip over your stool so that no one else would sit on it. They would know that that was not intended for you. In that sense, the golden stool is also kept turned on its side, as we see in the
So this is interesting because according to the Ashanti kind of practice, they would actually have these wooden stools in the home, right? And this would be typically a coming of age type present. And these wooden stools would be used by people frequently, right? Every day when they're in their home, when they're sitting, they would belong to that one individual. And whenever that person would leave the room, would not be present, the stool is actually turned on its side, thus signifying, right, that this belongs to someone who's not physically present at this moment. So one of the things I want you guys to think about is there might be certain chairs at the dining room table or in the living room where the same people always sit, right? Like dad's recliner or mom's always on the settee. So everyone might kind of have their seat. So I don't know what your family's like. My family actually, we mix it up. We sit in different chairs, but if your family has rules where everyone sits in a certain, seat every night, if y'all sit around the dinner table or whatever, just try sitting in somebody else's seat. Don't say anything about it. Just sit in their seat and see if anybody notices. Because we do kind of have that drive as getting in routine, right? Routines are all weird right now with quarantine, but we have that kind of getting in routine and it feels like our place, right? So if we took that even a step further, then when you're not in the living room, when you're not at the dining room table, your chair would actually be turned on its side so that it's signifying to everyone that that is your object, but you're not physically present at that moment. Okay, so maybe just try turning all the dining room chairs on the side, or flipping the sofa over. And if people ask, just be like, Sika Kofi, right? And they'll totally get it, and you can explain it to them, the Ashanti people. All right, so again, here's a picture that will show you the king on his throne, and then right beside him, you have another throne for the stool. So again, what is this object? It represents the soul of the Ashanti people. And again, this would be like maybe our Constitution, which doesn't sit in the Oval Office next to the president, but has that kind of powerful kind of understanding or soul of our nation. And then the other thing to associate with the Ashanti is gold. You can see it in the kente cloth that the king is wearing. You can see it in the emblems being held, okay, by the assistants. Gold is the main idea, the main color here. All right, I think that's it for the Ashanti. Yep.